event drawing. Thank you everyone for joining us today. What an honor to kick off Women's History Month with everyone present. I have the exciting task of introducing these two beautiful women today. However, before I do that, I'd like to point out some of the items on the table in front of you. The first thing I'd like to bring your attention to is the Women's Health Passport. Inside that is going to be some information on women's health and wellness. Super awesome stuff. Inside of the passport as well is an event calendar put together by Multicultural Affairs, kind of listing the events that we have for Women's History Month. And then beside that are going to be surveys that we really appreciate you filling out before you leave. That helps us with the programming big time. All right. I'd like to bring your attention back to these women. With me I have Cherie Spoon and Joséphine Rice. Joséphine is going to be presenting first. Joséphine comes from the pertain of the Mohawk Nation of the Iroquois Confederacy. It was during her time in Alaska that she learned from family members about matriarchal traditions of the Mohawk and other Iroquois member nations. She recently began working here at ENMU as the Administrative Assistant for Academic Services, and just in time too, because we are very excited to have her with us today. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming to the floor Joséphine Rice.
It's an honor to be asked to be here today. I've never done anything like this before, and to be asked to speak about something so near and dear to me is a special honor. I'd like to start with a quick vocabulary lesson. First Nations. Here in America, we are called Native Americans. Northward in Canada, we are called First Nations because we're not Americans. Yeah. My father came down from Quebec. The Quebec people and people, all of the Native people in Canada call themselves First Nations. Iroquois, as Ella said, it's a confederacy. It's not a tribe. It's not a nation. It is an alliance of independent nations who came together for military and economic benefit. So you think NATO or European Union, and that's us. We were a force to be reckoned with when the European immigrants first started coming here. Nobody really knows how old the Iroquois alliance is. That's something historians kind of like to chew over. By our oral tradition, the Iroquois alliance is at least 40 generations old. So, long time. In the time since the Europeans came, we have been sought out because of our military power and our unity. We've been sought by the Dutch, the English, and the French at varying times for alliances, for protection against other natives, and oftentimes for use of our lands. The original tribes, as shown here on our flag, which is taken from our wampum belt that signifies the Confederacy. Mohawk, Seneca, in the center, Onondaga, signified by the white pine tree. The pine tree needles come in stacks of 4. And then on the west is Cayuga and Oneida. These were the first 5 nations. We were joined by the Tuscarora in the 18th century, just before the Revolutionary War. My father was a Mohawk from the town of Iroquois in Quebec. It's right across I'm sorry, when I speak in Quebec, I speak in a little bit of a French accent. It is right across from the city of Montreal on the banks of the St. Lawrence River. Understand, in the east, because the area is so densely populated, and because there have been Europeans there for so long, the vast majority of our lands is under someone else's control. What is left to us is primarily towns. The reservations, and in Canada what we call reserves, are for the most part merely towns surrounded by urban sprawl. The town of Iroquois is no exception. You wouldn't even know you were on Indian country, except the traffic signs change from French to English. We keep the English traffic signs because we don't like the French very much. Because we are so urbanized, We've had to learn how to survive and thrive in cities while still maintaining our history, our bonds, our ties to community, and our traditions. The Mohawks, there's an urban myth that we don't have any fear of heights. I didn't get that, Gene. But they are famous world over for high elevation steel work. The Empire State Building, Brooklyn Bridge, Twin Towers, the Seattle Space Needle. Mohawk steel crews have worked on all of these. We're not going to argue with that urban myth because it's job security. Any Mohawk man who says he's Mohawk is going to have a job. So, yeah, that's fine for us. How many people know the Twilight movies? Vampires? Wolves? Yeah, most of you. Sue Clearwater, Chief Swan's girlfriend, was played by Alex Rice from Gachnaque by way of this little neighborhood in Brooklyn that's called Little Caughnawaga. That's the British pronunciation of Gachnaque. Her uncle came down to do the steel work like my grandfather did. Her uncle came to the New York area. My grandfather went to Boston. And so for, 3 generations, we have been what's called urban Indians. Well, what we're here for is for the matriarchy. You know, I went online to try to find a definition for what matriarchy actually is. And the first thing I came to, Encyclopedia Britannica, I love this, defines it as a hypothetical, I'm a hypothetical, I guess, social system in which the mother or female elder has absolute authority over the family group. By extension, one or more women in a council exert a similar level of authority over the community as a whole. While I do disagree with Encyclopedia Britannica about me being hypothetical, they are partially correct. In the Mohawk Matriarchy, the focus is on balance. It's on wisdom, rational thinking, civility. It's not a case of, women rule and men rule. It's not a nanner nanner type thing. The women's council is balanced by the men's council. Neither gender has authority over the other gender. Each gender has its own responsibilities. And we'll go into that a little bit further. I learned something while I was preparing for this talk. I had always known that the Iroquois Alliance exerted some influence over the formation of the United States government as we know it. The Iroquois Alliance is the first, the oldest, the longest existing democracy in the world. The men of the 13 colonies, especially the northern colonies, they knew about us. They had to. We were a major presence in their lives. They studied our laws. They knew about our councils. Many men attended our councils and, in fact, for some reason objected to the presence of women at those councils. I can't figure it out. Anyway, the women stayed and the men got used to it. Benjamin Franklin wrote in 1751, these are his words, "It would be a strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages, it's me, should be capable of forming a scheme for such a union and be able to execute it in such a manner as that it has subsisted for ages and appears indissoluble, and yet that a like union should be impracticable for 10 or a dozen English colonies." Next time you hold a dollar bill in your hand, look on the back of it, that eagle with the 13 arrows in its talons. It's a good thing there were no copyright laws back then. The Iroquois eagle only had 6 arrows in its talons, these 5 plus the Tuscarora. Charles Thompson in 1782 got the idea that the new country needed a slogan, a logo. And he thought an eagle, but not the British imperial eagle. He wanted the American bald eagle. And the idea of those arrows in its talons signified unity and strength. And that was taken from the Iroquois Alliance. Unfortunately, what they did not take from the Iroquois Alliance was the codes pertaining to women. That came about 100 years later, and that's what I learned when I was preparing for this course. I knew about the Iroquois, the American Constitution. I didn't know about the Iroquois women and American suffrage. The founders of American suffrage, most of them were from New York State, upstate New York, which is solidly in Iroquois country. These women knew the urbanized Onondaga, Seneca, and Mohawk women who lived in that area, who did business in that area. They were friends with family members. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, Matilda Gage. These women have been called the women who were ahead of their times. And these women had dealings with Onondaga, Seneca, and Mohawk women. At the first women's suffrage convention, the first convention that was called specifically to discuss women's rights, Elizabeth Cady Stanton called Lucretia Mott over to the side and said, before this convention, you go spend a summer with the Senecas. She did. And her eyes were open. What Lucretia said after that, when she came into the conference, let's see. Yeah, Lucretia Mott said that the women in the conference needed to reject everything they had been taught about their roles and instead participate vociferously in the debate. This was completely unknown to women at the time. You're supposed to sit there silently with your hands in your laps, not say anything, not have an opinion, be very ladylike, and not make a fuss about anything. And so to be urged to participate vociferously in the debate was unheard of for women at the time. Unheard of for American women, not for Iroquois. Matilda Gage was another one. At the time, she was kind of a free thinker. Any of you who are science majors, you might have heard of the Matilda effect. That is a tendency for women to be undercredited with scientific thought, scientific ideas, scientific inventions. The Matilda effect was named for Matilda Gage. Matilda Gage studied Iroquois law. She knew Iroquois women, especially the Mohawks. She was also from upstate New York, which is where the first meetings came to be. In her book, which is called Woman, Church, and State, Matilda Gage wrote about the Iroquois, the first conception of inherent rights, natural equality of condition, and the establishment of a civilized government upon this basis. Never was justice more perfect, nor civilization higher. In the 1890s, Matilda protested the fact that women didn't have the vote. She attempted to vote in a school board election. Big deal. She was arrested, and she was tried by her own people. In that same year, she was adopted by the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation, probably at Akwesasne. She was not only adopted, she was given a special name. The Mohawk believe that the names we are given as adults have significance. They tell people something about our standing in the community. Matilda Gage was given a name that entitled her to sit on the Women's Council, that entitled her to vote for the representatives who would go to the Central Choir in Onondaga country to represent that village and that clan. Matilda Gage was given a voice, and she was the first woman to do that. Understand, in the 1890s, women had no legal rights. They had no legal voice. They didn't even own their own bodies. They could not bring lawsuits. They could not exert any control over their children. They didn't own their children. They didn't have any right to decide about education of their children. They didn't have property rights, even the property they brought into a marriage that was signed over to the husband. They were absolutely controlled by husband, by father, by brother, or by a legal guardian, also male, of course. They had no voice, and they had no options to get around that. The church at the time said that in marriage, the two become one, and the one is male. The church taught that women are subordinate and inferior, and that is the natural order of things. And science said, yes, that is the natural order of things. That's the way it's supposed to be. So women who had grown up in that environment, who had always been, whose mothers and grandmothers had been in that environment, for them to encounter women who not only had rights, but had always had them, who took these rights for granted. It was mind-boggling. It was something that they could not even fathom. But when they realized that these so-called ignorant savages had had rights for nearly 1,000 years that American and European women weren't entitled to, it started changing minds in New York, eventually on the East Coast, and eventually internationally. And these are the women who started the national suffrage movement. In the years since then, paths have diverged. Feminism has gone one way, and the matriarchy has gone another. I don't know if that's good or bad. Circumstances are very different. We have never dealt with injustice the way women in Western society have. Equality, why would we want that? This is probably a poor example, but if I'm on the Titanic and it's going down, I want the captain to holler, "Women and children to lifeboats." I don't want there to be an equal rights struggle over those lifeboats. A knockdown dragout will not end up well for me. In a matriarchal society, women will be on the lifeboats. And the men whom we have educated and raised properly will proudly help us load. Because the men understand that the women are more important to the continuity and the culture than the men are. We are called the mothers of nations. And it's not because we make babies. We are called the keepers of the fire. And it's not like over in Great Britain where, keep the home fires burning till the men folk get back from the war. No. For us, one meaning of the fire is life. It is the spirit of the people. It is culture. It is continuity. And that's what we are charged with. Feminism will say, I deserve these rights because I'm just as good as men. I'm not going to argue with that. Matriarchy teaches that our rights flow from our responsibilities. What responsibilities? Women have the right to appoint men who will represent them. Those guys that you call chiefs in the book, chiefs? No, they're representatives. They are servants of the women who appoint them. But that means we also have the responsibility to check up on them, to correct them, to chastise them, and to fire them, if necessary. Women judge crimes against women. In Western society, if a woman is brutalized, if she is raped or murdered, a man might be arrested by a male police officer. He might be tried by a male judge, and his case would be heard by a male jury. Lots of opportunities to explain how it's really her fault because she was dressed provocatively, or, well, I bought her dinner, what did she expect? No. That doesn't happen when women are judging. Women were the only ones who could impose a death penalty. We give life, we decide when it goes, when it's taken. We didn't actually do the killing, but we could tell the warrior society when somebody needs to die. And even that needed to be taken with responsibility, wisdom, and with balance, with rational thought. Women owned the land. We owned the food. We distributed the food, and we decided who lives in what houses. What that meant, though, is that when the men came to burn the fields, to drive us out of Mohawk Valley, and the children starved, that was right here, on our shoulders. There was no one else to blame. That was our responsibility. And worst of all, women have the right to veto war. Didn't want to go to war? Women could say, not today, guys. Stay home. But what that also means is that women have the responsibility to say, when our people are in danger, when our allies are in danger, I will send my son, I will send my brother, my husband, toward the gunfire. It's a very personal responsibility, and it's one that we must adhere to as women. There's a story out of World War I. Before America got into the war, Canada was sending guys over to fight for Great Britain. And a bunch of Iroquois men went down to sign up and get their uniforms. One of them was underage. So the recruiter said, you go home to Mama. So he did. Kid goes home to Mama, and Mama sends him back to the recruiter with a letter from Mama that said, we are Iroquois. We have been allies with the British since before there was a Canada. It is my son's responsibility to go fight for our allies. It is my responsibility to send him. And by the way, we're not Canadian citizens, so your laws don't apply to us. I wish I could say how that ends. I don't know, but I suspect being wartime, the kid got a waiver and went to war. So these rights flow from the responsibilities. I'm 68 years old. I'm a widow. I have no living children. I've lived thousands of miles from Mohawk country, but I'm still a part of the motherhood. I am a keeper of the fire. Wherever I am, my circle, my little here and now, wherever I live, is my circle, and for that I am responsible. I am responsible for leaving it better than it would have been if I had not been here. If I fail, I have failed not only the people in my circle, whether that's my people or other people who don't look like me, whether it's people up on a skyscraper in New York City or here on a campus in Portales, New Mexico. It doesn't matter. My circle, I'm responsible. And if I fail that circle, I have failed not only the circle, I have failed the ancestors, including the first Joséphine Rice for whom I was named. Most of all, I have failed the next generation, because my actions are lessons that I use to teach the next generation. Last time I was on the res, my cousin's husband told me a story. A guy came back from New York City, brought a couple bottles of whiskey with him. Kahnawake is a dry town. There is no liquor allowed there. That's one of the ways in which we've survived for hundreds of years. Word got out. Come dinner time, an elder woman walked into the house. She walked into the kitchen. She started opening cabinets. She found the bottles. She poured the bottles out, dumped the bottles in the garbage, and walked back out. Not a word was said. No drama, no profanity, no screaming, no finger pointing. Just she came, she did, she left, and she taught. The man never brought whiskey back into his wife's home again. And the children learned what matriarchs do and how they do it. My actions are also lessons to the next generation. And this generation will pick up where I leave off when it's my time. unto the 7th generation is what we are responsible for. And that's where our power and our rights come from. And now, for the next generation.
That's good. If anyone has any questions for Joséphine specifically, I'd like to open the floor now for those questions.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. What you said about the matriarchy system is the same in Africa. I was able to relate with it. In Africa, the queen is not the king's wife. The queen is the king's mother. So there's no way that the king has all the power to do whatever he wants to do. And even when it comes to enthroning and dethroning kings, the queen mother has say in it. So in Africa, the thing about gender equality, everybody has its role. Whether you are a man or a woman, you have your role in the society that you play. So it's not like the man has an upper hand over you that he can do whatever he wants to do. So when you are explaining yourself, I was able to resonate well when it comes to the African traditional system. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Joséphine? All right. Well, thank you very much, Joséphine. All right. Up next, we have Cherie Spoon, the next generation. Cherie is a member of the Zuni Pueblo. She's also a student here at ENMU. She's majoring in elementary and special education. Not only that, but she works for the Department of Multicultural Affairs in the Office of Native American Affairs. Today she's going to be sharing with us her own knowledge and experience with Zuni women in the Zuni Pueblo. So please help me in welcoming to the floor the best co-worker in the world.
Hi. First, I'd like to start off by mentioning that we have 3 generations in this room. First, we have my grandmother, Carolyn Lamy, and my mother, Farah Vicenci. They're sitting right here. What I'll be talking about is I will first introduce myself in my native language as well as English. I will then proceed to mentioning what my traditional regalia, both the Zuni term and the English term, and some fun facts along with that, as well as the roles and responsibilities of a Zuni woman, and I will also like to share some photos with you all, and my experiences and challenges I faced living in Zuni or as a Zuni woman. Keshi, Kodalaga de Genoa. Ho Cherie Spoon Leshina, Ho Astanta Denalagas, Ho Cherie Spoon Leshina, Ho Astanta Denalaga Yasto Debikoi. Ho Dona Kodan Dakakwe Awan Chatle, Ho Atha Shina Achi, Fair the Sensi, Dub Carly Spoon Leshina. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Cherie Spoon. I am from the Zuni tribe of the Zuni Pueblo. I am 19 years old and I'm currently majoring in elementary education / special education, minoring in bilingual education here at Eastern New Mexico University. My clans are Turkey and Child of a Frog. My parents are Farah Vicenci and Carlos Boone. My traditional regalia is super important to me, so I start from the bottom to the top. For right now, I am not currently wearing the right moccasins that are used. Here we have them. They are made from deer hide. So usually us Zuni women would wear these, as well as the wraps. Here are the wraps. These are called doabokwawas, which are called moccasins, and here are the wraps. They're made from deer hide. Fun fact about the wraps, it was said that by our ancestors that how many wraps you had on indicated how wealthy you were. As for the dress, which is the bottom part, as you can see the purple around here, that is the dress. The yatanane, which is the manta, the black. As you can see, the red line indicates the lifeline, the bloodline, and then the green line represents vegetation. The etnine, it's right under the apron. I'm not sure if you can see it. That is the sash belt. The hasiquinne is the apron. This. And then you have your pitona, the backscarf. It was a fun fact about that one as well is it was used by Zuni women to protect themselves from the suns when they tended to their gardens. Then you have your moktakune, your necklace, and then your hepasiquine, your bracelets. But as for the roles and responsibilities of the Zuni woman, the Zuni child was taught at a young age the responsibility of contributing to the survival of the family and community. Responsibilities were taught from the time a youngster is about 5 or 6 years old. The Zuni child was taught by their mothers the basic skills and knowledge appropriate for the young female. They learn by assisting and imitating their mothers, aunts, and grandmothers in the daily chores of corn grinding, cooking, tending to waffle gardens, and other responsibilities such as caring for the young members of the family as babysitters. The girls were given instructions on the feminine duties and responsibilities. They were told of the important role they play in the kinship system, especially the purification rites with water, such as the purification of clan children. Prayers pertaining to the feminine role were an important part of their upbringing. Young ladies were instructed to select mates who were hardworking. It was stressed that when choosing a mate, handsome looks was not a factor. The young lady would need to choose a mate who would provide and look after the family. As youngsters, we were instructed on the social complexities of the clan system, in which we are not allowed to marry into the same clan. The clan system is a representation of brotherhood and sisterhood in the Zuni way of life. Here are some pictures I would like to share with you all. I was given a pointer. But for the top left picture, here are some Zuni women tending to their waffle gardens. The most common produce that I've seen so far has to be corn, which is very significant to the purification rites of the clan children. In the top right corner, we see a young Zuni woman holding a pottery on top of her head, which the pottery holds water that she may have gotten from the Zuni water to water her garden. The pottery was also used to carry food and water to wherever they carried. As for the bottom, we have a painting by Henry C. Bulling. It depicts the Zuni women corn grinding. This painting is sold in a museum for almost $5,000 to $7,000. I have no idea what is going on. I have more pictures, but for some reason this computer is not getting them. But throughout my life, I wasn't as privileged to learn the Zuni traditions and the Zuni culture related to women, such as corn grinding or making oven bread. I did, however, learn the culture and history of the Zuni women. I always felt left out when my peers would mention that they went cooking instead of going to school, went corn grinding, or talked about a semi-religious event that they attended. I now realize that I have many resources to go to now that I am old enough. My best friend, for one, invited me to cookie days to help her very traditional family and is willing to have them show me every step. My family has also been a huge support in teaching me the ways of the Zuni women. As my mother would say, a woman's job in the household doesn't stop. I only have 2 pictures on here. There's more. But what I liked about in these 2 pictures, they're 2 different traditional dressings. As for the one on the left, the first picture, during elementary school, we were given an opportunity to perform a social dance in front of the whole community to showcase what we've learned and practice every single day towards the end, just as a end of the school year performance. In the second picture, we have another elementary school performance, which is called Abachu. It's a social dance. Abachu in Zuni means Navajo. I'm not quite sure we learned the social dance, but I had 2 other pictures. I have no idea what happened. So as for the 3 generations of Zuni women, I would like for them to introduce themselves if they would like to come up here.
Caroline Lechinaho, Donna Pedano, Iroquois and Cherie Spoon. Good afternoon. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Carol Amy. My clans are Turkey and child of the Tansy Western plant. I'm Cherie's grandmother.
Donna Ketikanawa, her fairly sense election. Hotana Kadadoa Gawan Challenge. Hot Cherie Spoon. Good afternoon, my name is Fairly Sensi. My clans are Turkey clan and child of the corn clan, and I am Cherie's mother.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I can see the color purple being a theme. Is there a reason?
My favorite color is purple. Yeah, I guess that's just it. Any dress can be made in any color you would like, so there's really no specific color that represents.
What were some difficulties that you faced as you have been growing up and just becoming a woman and as a Zuni woman that you have dealt with?
I think the education, just like I mentioned, that some of my peers were more knowledgeable of the stuff that was going on, and I always felt left out because I wanted to be like them. Usually you get made fun of if you didn't know certain things about Zuni. Like I mentioned, making oven bread. They would say like, oh, she can't make bread, or like, imagine being with a girl who doesn't know how to make bread. So I would never say like that I didn't know how. I would never laugh, but I just didn't mention that I didn't know how because I didn't want to be made fun of. So that was one of the challenges, was that I didn't know how to. And it's because my family didn't really grow up traditional to as how other families do. Like they cook every weekend, or their families are religious that they do it every day, or like during ceremonies and stuff. So that was never our family. Only at certain points at the time, but I was still very young to like learn at that age. And one of it is the language. Also, growing up, you're always afraid. I was always afraid to speak my language at home because I was always scared of being made fun of, or at school especially. Like I'm pretty confident now in speaking my language at home, especially to my great grandmothers because they're your great grandmothers. They're the fourth generation. But as for that, I think it's just the reason I speak my language here because nobody really knows how to correct me. So that's why I feel pretty confident to speak it here. But now that I'm confident speaking here, I can confidently speak it at home. Where now that I'm grown up, they're like, no, this is how you say it. Or like, this is the sentence structure of that. And yeah.
Can I answer?
Yeah, you guys are welcome to answer.
Yeah. There's families in Zuni that are more traditional. Like there are in our Pueblo, there's families that are in like maybe the medicine society, or they're involved in like the religious doings in the community. So those are the families that mostly like do the traditional cooking like every weekend. Like in December we have our traditional religious doing what's called Shaloko. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's our main religious ceremony in December. And so at the beginning of the year, there's like maybe 6 families that will be participating or hosting what's called the Shaloko. So when those families are hosting, they build like homes for the ceremony. And so those are the families that have people go over to their homes. So they're cooking every weekend, and they're baking bread, they're cooking traditional foods, and all of that. So our family is not really, I guess, we are into our religion, but we don't really host any like kind of ceremonies or anything. And our family is not involved in like any like medicine societies or anything like that. So she really didn't have an opportunity to learn like the traditional cooking, the traditional baking and all that. We do the baking, we do the traditional the bread baking and the stews, because we have, right now we're having like called the religious nightly dances like maybe every other weekend, and so we do the bread making and the traditional cooking. So we still are involved, but not that much. So.
Thank you.
So the part of the religious dances that she's talking about, we can't show, like, because we're women and it's sacred to our culture. But nowadays you can pretty much see a lot of what we talk about on social or like on internet. But we, as like right now, we cannot show pictures of that to you all. So.
Could you describe like the clan system a little more in depth in terms of like how exactly it works? And like you were talking about the other day, like your cousins, and people are like, I have a lot of cousins.
Yeah. Okay, so like I mentioned, my clans are Turkey and Child of a Frog. Your first clan represents your mother's first clan, as well as the second clan represents your father's first clan, in which mine is Turkey, so her first clan is Turkey, and my father's first clan is Frog. And going with that, some character traits that, we all have character traits within our clan system. Since I'm a turkey and a frog, both represent loud, so I am very loud. If you're my friend, you're probably like, you know. I'm very loud, I'm very talkative. As for the frog clan, I love water, I love swimming, I love rain, anything to do with water. As well as, I also mentioned to some of my friends, or one of my friends that I have African American cousins, but that's because they're my clan cousins. So like I mentioned, there's like represents brotherhood and sisterhood, right? So their first clan happens to be Frog. So I call them my brothers or my cousins. And in which when I ask like, well, some of my friends are like, I only have 2 cousins. And I'm like, I have about at least probably almost 20 cousins, probably more. I mostly talk to my cousins on my mother's side. It goes with also the family as well. My aunties and yeah. I'm also an only child, so keep that in mind as well. I don't have any siblings. Yeah. Any more questions?
Actually, I wanted to make a comment to Joséphine that, you know, I love your presentation, but I love how you transition from, you know, the elder generation to the younger generation with her. So that was very smart to do. It was beautiful how you did it. So I just wanted to.
You know, Cherie, I just love your outfit.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I saw you this afternoon, I thought, wow, I'm the first time of seeing you know, a Zuni outfit like that. You know, and what you said about clans also reminds me of my own home. We also have clans like that, like mine's like an eagle. We have dog. We have, you know, these animals. So I'm going to relate with some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah. Some other clans also tie in with other tribes as well. I don't know if we have any natives in here too. Yeah.
Agama.
What are your clans?
Sun Clan.
Yeah.
My dad's a Sun Clan.
We also have a Sun clan, which is the Yato clan. I think that's my grandpa. That's my grandpa's clan. Oh, that was
Badger Eagle.
okay. I'm thinking of something else. But as for the Sun, I know that they love hot stuff as well. The corn, you want to explain the corn characteristics?
Corn is very loud too, so I'm very loud. But corn clan also represents the different six different directions and the colors. So all the different colors represent the directions. East is blue, west is red, south is white, and north is yellow. Top is multicolored and bottom is black. But corn is used for multiple purposes in Zuni, to make cornmeal or used in religious activities, to make food as well.
One of the things I know about corn is that when I would have nightmares, my mom would put a corn by my head, which would take away the bad dreams. Because corn is like your child. When you drop your corn, a piece falls off, and they say that that little corn kernel is crying. So you have to quickly pick it up. It may not go back on, but you just have to keep it with you at all times, or not at all times, but in a safe place. So, any more questions?
All right, there are no more questions. Let's give Cherie some